Hey everyone, so as an ADC, we always talk about consistency and how it's the most important thing to climbing elo. Well, on that note, we figured that we'd talk about some major problems we see out of ADC players very often when we review their lower elo games. We'll be tackling 4 different issues that you definitely want to make sure you're not committing in this guide, so let's get into it. But first, for our question of the day, what do you think about teleport as a summoner spell? Personally, I'm tired of seeing it on all top and mid laners every single game in competitive play. I can appreciate that it enables cross-map plays and stuff of that nature, but I personally dislike that it's very often a get out of jail for free card after misplaying the laning phase. I'd love it if it wasn't usable for the first 8 minutes of the game, but then massively buffed for teleporting across the map for the rest of the game. Maybe not the most elegant solution, but let me know if you're okay with it or how you change it in the comments below. Alright, let's jump into our first mistake for this guide. Well, it's actually 2 mistakes, but we'll get to that. Caitlyn and Morgana are leashing for their jungler. The enemy Blitzcrank is annoying and hooks the buff. Should someone have been watching that? Yeah, but whatever. This doesn't really matter all that much. What does matter is having to leash versus a lane who did not have to leash. As an ADC in a lane with a ranged support versus melee, you generally want to be shoving. That way you can avoid all-ins with a wave advantage and harass the enemy more freely. Alright, so far in the lane, both ADCs have made critical mistakes. What do you think they are and why? To understand Caitlyn's mistake, let's go over Tristana's first. This may seem Tristana specific, but we only chose her to highlight how players generally don't think about their first few waves. Why did she level E? Fun fact, you don't actually have to level an ability, which is a very important concept to know, especially on Tristana. A lot of players push the first 2 waves way too quickly, resulting in a weak crash. By leveling E, Tristana has guaranteed that this will happen since she can't slow push anymore, which means that she won't get any of the potential 3-wave crash benefits such as a cheater recall, setting up a dive, roaming mid, etc. Knowing that, what's Caitlyn's mistake then? Well, it's the fact that she fixes Tristana's mistake for her and tries to contest the push. Caitlyn should know from the first second of the lane that her Morgana is probably not going to be that useful. The fact that she overstayed to help the Echo after the Blitzcrank hook is a bad sign. Yes, Echo is screwed, but Morgana losing XP is even worse. If this was in Challenger or something, yes, maybe Caitlyn can bite back for lane control with the range advantage Morgana has over Blitz. But as we know, supports tend to be a little AFK when it comes to pushing early waves. Remember, the win condition that we always talk about for ADCs with melee supports. Getting a wave advantage and slow pushing allows your support to look for all-ins. Caitlyn is prolonging her bad situation by hitting the wave. She's keeping it fairly even, which means that the Morgana that's behind in experience is going to be vulnerable to an engage. Tristana's mistake of over-pushing is completely nullified. The Caitlyn is doing her job for her. And what do you know? The Morgana actually gets hooked and gets her flash forced out. So, what should Caitlyn have done? Simple. If your opponent is fast pushing their first 2 waves, then just let them push. Last hit minions and let the wave crash. They're literally handing you wave advantage. You'd get a bounce back on the cannon wave, then you can turn that into a crash on the 4th or 5th wave for a free recall. Boom, that's basically a guaranteed advantage. But before we continue, as a reminder, if you want to improve quickly and get the rank that you've always wanted, then check out our hyper improvement system at SkillCapped.com. We have professional courses by top players, Smurf commentaries where a challenger player walks you through how to climb out of every rank from Iron to Diamond, and we upload tons of new exclusive guides to our website every week. In fact, we're so confident that you'll improve using our system that if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using SkillCapped, you can claim a full refund. So there's no risk. What are you waiting for? Check out SkillCapped.com and get the rank that you've always wanted, link in the description below. Moving on, the second biggest issue we see from ADCs is something fairly frustrating to watch at times. Let's show you what we mean. As Vayne arrives back from her recall, she ends up joining a fight around Dragon. After cleaning up the Skarner, she continues chasing the Jhin. Unfortunately for her, she didn't factor in how well Heal and Gale Force would allow him to kite. Instead of scoring a kill, she's the one who ends up being chunked out of lane, which will force her to recall after just getting back out on the map. Now, don't get us wrong, that's not her mistake. We don't really mind seeing stuff like this. It's super easy to miscalculate certain situations, and we will rarely fault someone for seeing what they can potentially do in a fight. What happens next, though, is the problem. We can see that after Vayne's recall as she runs back to lane, that Jhin is finishing up his duties by crashing the wave and probably taking his own recall. Of course, Vayne clears the wave at her tower and proceeds to push the next wave as well. As she's finishing that up, what do you think is the one thing Vayne shouldn't look to do after pushing? Pushing the tower is the correct poor choice here. Let's see what happens and then talk about why it was so bad. Vayne tries to walk up to the tower, but Jhin is here to defend, and Skarner happened to be ganking at the same time as well. Instead of getting anything done, Vayne just hands over a free shutdown. It's not this specific mistake that we have a problem with, but rather how many players tend to just play in the moment without looking at the very obvious clues about what's going to happen. When she got back to lane, Jhin was setting up a recall. What did Vayne expect to happen here? That Jhin flew to the moon and never came back? Of course he's walking back bottom. You're never going to get a turret plate, so why are you even trying to push here? Even if she doesn't get ganked, it's a waste of time walking up the tower. She had 3 other good options from this push. She could base, roaming could be okay, or better yet, just go to her Gromp for an extra bit of cash, which is worth nearly as much as a turret plate anyway. League is a strategy game about seeing patterns and predicting things with the information you have, but it's insane how often we see this even in platinum level games or higher. Players are just playing in the moment without a care about the very obvious information available to them. Like this Ezreal, who begins channeling his recall after pushing, only to realize that he has to push another wave. If only there had been some incredibly obvious way for him to have been planning around this. Here's the final takeaway. It's okay to make poor choices when you were planning ahead. League has a lot of variables, and it's very difficult to always make the right choice, very difficult to always see the right thing coming. That being said, if it's incredibly apparent that you in no way are trying to plan or predict anything, and you're just playing in the moment, then there's the problem. Alright, this next mistake is an overly common reaction to a lost teamfight, which just makes matters worse for ADCs. Let's take a look. Tristana and her team are doing fairly well for themselves and look to start the Baron, while the enemy team approaches. Unfortunately, things turn sour as Hecarim strolls in, stealing the buff. Tristana plays the ensuing fight pretty well, despite how poorly things are going. Sadly, her good positioning doesn't last very long, as she leaps in to try and kill Jinx. Kench flashes over, saves her, and Tristana ends up dead. Again, just like Vayne, we don't really blame her for this. The Baron call was a team decision, and if Kench didn't have flash to save Jinx, we're pretty sure Trist aces the enemy team after instantly deleting her. It's hard to calculate everything in a team fight, and that was an understandable and completely fine mistake to make. The mistake comes in her itemization after her death. A lot of ADCs have knee-jerk reactions to dying in teamfights from what we've noticed. Notice that in her inventory, she bought a BF sword after dying, and upon respawning, she completed it into a GA. Okay, in a teamfight, if you die, ask yourself why you really died before ever buying a defensive item. Did my team just mess up really badly? Was my own positioning poor? Did I misuse an ability? Or did I jump into an angry catfish? The answer is definitely not a lack of armor for the Jinx damage that should never be hitting you. If you noticed, Trist went untouched this fight because of how many frontliners she has. There is no need for a defensive item here when you're this unthreatened in a teamfight. The only argument one could have is that she needed the most power possible for the Dragon Soul fight, since her team has 3 dragons. Well, Tristana needed about 800 gold from her respawning moment to turn that BF sword into an Infinity Edge. Dragon Soul wasn't spawning until 32 minutes into the game, which gave her a full 2 minutes from when she spawned to farm the rest of the gold. She could just say, hey guys, let's chill and let me finish this item real quick. There was no need for instant power. Let's watch the game deciding fight. Imagine if she had an IE here instead of this GA. When she's killing Hecarim, he'd probably die a second or 2 faster than he did. Then, as she bursts down Thresh, it probably takes her 1 less auto or so to finish him off. which gives her more time to hit the Tahm Kench and do even more damage than she's doing to him now. Instead, she isn't outputting max DPS, which leaves the Kench alive and healthy. He continues frontlining for his team, and Tristana can't do anything anymore. Look how worthless her GA is. In fact, it just goes wasted as it does nothing while she tries to defend the enemy's final push. Let's be very clear here. As an ADC, if no one on the enemy team can threaten you, then it is your job to deal maximum damage. You must kill the enemy team before they kill yours. Being insecure with your itemization and buying defensive items is not the way to do that. For our final mistake, it's a simple but overly common problem. Let's take a look. Ashe and her Yuumi don't have to leash, so they zone the enemy bot lane from getting into lane for a bit. Afterwards, Ashe can move into lane and start getting the shove. This continues for a while, and the matchup goes as it should. Ashe abuses her range advantage and punishes how weak Tristana and Lulu are together during the early game. As far as laning phases go, this is being played fairly well. It's nice to see someone punishing so well, until Ashe randomly begins to recall. There's quite a few poor things about this, so let's break it down. Number 1. Why would she recall while winning so hard? There's sometimes good reasons to do so, but this is not one of those times. In some cases, if you're out of wards and are afraid of mid and jungle roams, then recalling to get out of lane ASAP is not a bad option. It may suck, but being safe is better than dying. But we see both Seraphine and Evelynn on the map as she sets up her base timing. Evelynn is even pathing topside, so that's not even remotely an issue. Now, conceding a health and push advantage in lane is also fine if you're getting some other meaningful advantage in return. Something we frequently discuss is item-based timings. Ashe's purchased items off base were definitely not great. All she bought was boots and a longsword. That is in no way worth conceding this much lane control for. The biggest mistake of all that would have made this fine though is the wave she chose to base on. This wasn't even a wave crash, it was more like a wave tickle. Normally you want to base off large crashes like these, for example, so your opponent has to take longer to push out the lane and you can get back in time to freeze. Instead, Tristana easily shoves out the wave before Ashe manages to come back to lane. Here's why it was so horrendously bad. Do you see how Ashe is ahead in CS, but because her base timing was so awful, she's literally behind in terms of itemization? Yeah, don't do that. It's crazy how often we see ADCs throw good leads for the most random recalls out of nowhere. We definitely suggest being more aware of keeping track of your own recall timings so blunders like these don't happen to you. Alright everyone, that's going to wrap up this guide. And remember, if you want to improve fast and get the rank that you've always wanted, then check out SkillCapped.com, link in the description below. Otherwise, you know the deal. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get more premium guides with one goal in mind, helping you become a better player. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.